So the meeting is now called to order. There is a sign-in sheet that's circulating. If you would please sign in, we would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so today, and we want to thank all the members of the Ethics Committee for joining us today, because we've spent quite a bit of time looking at the ordinance and just trying to find some workable solutions to ensure primarily that all of our employees have the opportunity to lodge a complaint an ethics complaint if they should identify the need. And so that's why we came together today, because we know that as an ethics committee, you've had some of the same questions and concerns that we've had. And so we're all on the same team. And so we're hoping to find workable solutions for the problem that we've identified. So that's the purpose of our being here today. And so if there are any additions to the agenda, if you have a chance to take a look at the agenda, if you'd like to add anything to the agenda, please let us know at this time. Not, we have a motion.
So moved.
The agenda.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second, so we will proceed. At this time, we will invite the public to comment. If you have comments, please sign in, and you can do so at this time. Okay. Since we've got some new people here, if everybody could just kind of go around and introduce yourselves, let us know which committee, the members of the Ethics Committee, so that we know who everyone is. I think that would be very helpful.
Richard Donnell, City Council, and member of the Audit Committee.
Marta Wallace, City Council, and on the Audit Committee. Good morning.
Christy Cruzen, I'm with CRS CPAs on the Audit Committee.
Ross Pretty on the Audit Committee.
Freeman McKendra, and I'm on the Ethics Committee.
I'm Kelsey Merriweather, Human Resources Director for the City of Jackson.
I'm Sean Evans, I'm on the Ethics Committee.
Gary Jenkins, and the Audit Committee.
Ron Schultz, Chief of Staff for the Mayor, serve as the liaison for the Audit Committee, City staff.
Teresa Luna, attorney for the city.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all. We appreciate your attendance at the meeting. As I mentioned earlier, the main purpose that we're here, we'll try to use our time judiciously. I know everybody has a busy schedule. But we wanted to look at our findings, or share our findings of our review of the ordinance, particularly with looking at the access that city employees have to lodge an anonymous complaint. In the ordinance as it's currently written, there's no provision for that. And so we've identified several gaps in provisions. And so we wanted to discuss those today, knowing that you've had some of the same concerns, and see if we can find some workable solutions.
I have copies of the ordinance just that way everyone has one, just in case if you don't.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thanks for bringing these, Ron.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Now, the Audit Committee has had an opportunity, of course, to review the ordinance and just kind of look at some things. But if you will, if you'll kind of look at some things, and since Ms. Luna is with us, she might, if you have questions about any of the provisions of the ordinance in particular, I'm sure she will be happy to lend her expertise to explain it to us. Okay. And while you're reviewing that, we'll ask Ms. Christy Cruzen to go ahead and review our findings. We've studied it for a number of months because it's something that's very important. And so we wanted to be very judicious in our approach to looking at it and any recommendations that we might come up with. So Christy, if you will review our work to date on this process.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Recommendations that we have come up with regarding the ordinance is expanding the definition of personal interest to include grandchildren and clarifying the scope of covered relationships and permissible gratuities for the city officials. One of the big things that we had really discussed in length is the anonymity issue and part of it. Current reporting system is, number one, they could go to HR, but not all complaints received by HR are ethics complaints. HR manages employee concerns related to discrimination, harassment, attendance, and performance, requiring employees to identify themselves when reporting. While these matters are handled confidentially and consistently with departments, anonymous reporting is not available internally. In contrast, ethics complaints by employees, such as those involving misuse of public resources or conflicts of interest, are addressed by the Ethics Committee and Internal Audit, with the current ordinance mandating disclosure of identity and notarized signatures for submission. The other is the Ethics Committee piece of it. They handle complaints involving the ethical violations, such as the misuse of public resources or conflicts of interest. These complaints must be submitted with the complainant's identity and notarized signature in accordance with the city's current ethics ordinance. This process is designed to ensure accountability and due process. Our committee discussed the difficulty of investigating anonymous complaints within the Ethics Committee, and any change that allows anonymity would require a formal amendment to the ordinance. The last piece that we discussed was the Tennessee Comptroller's Fraud, Waste, and Abuse reporting. This external platform, which allows citizens, employees, or officials to anonymously report suspected fraud, waste, or abuse. It operates independently of the city and ensures confidentiality and impartial investigation. The committee is considering adding a direct link from the city's website to the Comptroller's portal to facilitate access for those who prefer complete anonymity. So that's kind of the three avenues that we've kind of looked at. They tend to run parallel, and there's still some missing pieces within those that we need to figure out.
And that's what we wanted to look at today, those gaps in the provisions, to see if we can come up with some workable solutions for addressing that. All right. And thank you again to the Ethics Committee for joining us. And we wanted to see if you had any updates that you wanted to share with us at this time in terms of some of the issues that you're looking at, or that you might be concerned about.
In the entire process, not just what she did, right? So I came up with a list of things potentially here. So first of all, a question for clarification. The law handles what's illegal. What ethics does is legal behavior that we find problematic. That's the distinction we're looking at here. So in terms of modern terms, we talk about violation of democratic norms. This idea of you're violating norms or standards of behavior for how you're supposed to use your office. Is that a correct clarification?
Yes, to a certain extent, but if you look at the very end of the ordinance, one of the things that the Ethics Committee can get to, one of the conclusions that they can get to is that there's something very serious and illegal that's occurred. Okay, so their recommendation would be, could lead to a criminal, procedure. So yes, typically when someone reports their, if let's say I am just an interested citizen and I think that somebody in, power within the city of Jackson is doing something that I think is unethical, right? I don't really know if it's legal or, just illegal or just unethical, right? Or both. So I report it to the committee, and then when the committee goes through its process, then they come to a conclusion, and then they make a recommendation if they believe that there has been illegal acts that actually break a law. Okay. So let me get this straight. This ordinance is taken straight from state law. Okay, so if somebody breaks the ethics code of the city of Jackson, they're concurrently breaking the state law. That doesn't mean it's a criminal matter. It could be criminal, but it could be just a civil violation too. So illegal could be a civil violation, or it could be a, criminal violation. I think I may have discombobulated your question, but it can lead to a criminal
Okay.
matter.
Okay, so a couple of things I noticed going through here. If we're looking at 4021C, we limit it to official family. It seems that cohabitation's a larger thing today. Do we need to have something like a domestic partner or something like that to be included? I don't know if that's the official term or what.
Good question, and what the city council decided to do when they passed this ordinance, which is not, this was passed in 2006, but what they decided to do was to follow exactly what the state law said. So it tracks state law. So unless the city council wanted to go and deviate a little bit from state law, they could add things to this. But right now, it tracks state law for the definitions, and domestic partners are not included at the time in state law.
Now, Richard did some research and he found that grandchildren, a lot of times, so grandchildren was one of the things that we did add. So it could be applicable, or maybe to add partner or the term or something.
It just
Could
says we
be.
need to cover that in some way. I mean,
That
Based
probably
on
needs to be mentioned at the state level as well.
Yeah, does.
Yeah.
Common law, common law does a lot of that.
Based on the current definition of
Family.
right, so that's something I would suggest that we add. I mean, I don't know if y'all think that's a good idea. I'll make a motion, we can debate it, what's the process y'all want to proceed with this?
Kelsey, do you have any HR experience, or what would?
I mean, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any of our current policies where we cover any domestic partnerships. So I think, whatever you all recommend, maybe, again, something against you all's judgment, but I can't think of any, even for benefits or insurance purposes. I don't think we acknowledge the domestic partnership, so.
All right, so I understand in terms of insurance
Mhm.
in these kinds of things. So I'll give you a concrete example. Think about the Atlanta prosecution of President Trump for trying with the fake electors and all that. The district attorney appointed someone to be the special investigator, and it was her domestic partner, and he was getting paid $350,000 for this. And so does she benefit from that kind of money because they took trips and did other kinds of things? So in that respect, you have a official who's doing something that is benefiting her, in this case, her domestic partner, which would seem to me is something that we would want to avoid, and that just fills a gap. And with the rise of cohabitation, I think you'll see these kinds of things more frequently.
Yeah, I agree with that. So whatever we need to do to add that, I'm with it.
So we're recommending amending that statement to include domestic partners in accordance with, I guess, the state definition of
Well, the way I would describe it is that the state law, and Teresa, you can correct me if I'm wrong here because I'm going on legal grounds, is a floor, right? You're saying to kind of go above and beyond the state definition. You're not changing any state, right? Like ours is adopted from the state and serves as like the floor. You're choosing to expand it.
And the state does not include grandchildren, does it?
No.
So we add grandchildren and
Yeah.
domestic partners.
Right.
Okay, there you go.
I don't know that there's a state law definition of domestic partner, so when we add this to the ordinance, when you suggest it to the city council, you may also want to define, how long, someone has lived with them, or however you guys want to define it.
What's the usual definition of domestic partner? You know,
Well,
we can ask Sarah.
I don't know that I've seen a legal definition of domestic partner. I think it's whatever it's defined as in the ordinance. For example, you can have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you know, you may not live with them, or you may have lived with somebody for a month and then they move out and you live with somebody else, right? I mean, that's the way things are these days. So you would define, suggest a definition of they cohabitate, same residence, right, for a certain period of time. I mean, it's a month or a year or 6 months or however you guys want to suggest the definition to be.
Okay.
So what do y'all think is a good time period?
What do you think? You brought it up. What do you think?
So, I guess if you're cohabitating, I'm hopeful that most people have thought through this before they make that decision, especially as adults, which I think primarily is what we would be dealing with here. So, how about 6 weeks? Is that okay? Too short?
I think
Too
that's
long?
too short.
Too short?
What do you think then?
Well, you know, the old definition of a common law marriage was what, 7 years? And so I would think some derivative of that may not be 7 years, but, you know, where there's established commitment. You know, otherwise, it could be a revolving door of partners.
I agree with that.
We're not a common law state. This is not a
Right.
common law state, but one thing that it would hinge on would be legal residence. For example, I don't want to use anybody here as an example, but you know, maybe someone, you know, female A moved in with female B, but she still gets her mail at, you know, her old address, but she's living with the fella, you know, and she lives with him for 6 months or a year, but her legal address is somewhere else. That's where the complication comes in. You know, what is her legal address? Do you want it to be legal address? Do you want it to be where she has resided? You know.
Madam Chairman, why don't we state what we said, that we include grandparents and domestic partners, and then ask the attorney to come up with a definition of what domestic partners means. And she can send it to us, and so we'll know what she's talking about.
Let me do a little
I think
research
that's
on it
good.
and see if I can find some sort of Tennessee case law that has defined that term and then suggest that to you guys, and you can
And then
go
we
from
can
there.
look that in.
Thank you, I think that's an excellent suggestion, so we can move on, and she'll work on that.
Do we have to move and approve that, or can we just say it and it's done?
Well,
How much do you follow?
One of the
legal
committees,
procedure?
or both, could jointly, somebody needs to recommend it to the city council, because only the council can, 2 votes can change what the ordinance is, right? So the audit committee can recommend it, the ethics committee can recommend it, you can make
So,
a joint recommendation.
For today, if you want to have an official recommendation, it has to come from audit because you don't have enough ethics committee members here. But you have a full quorum of audit members, so you can discuss, but only audit can make a recommendation today.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we recommend to the city council that the definition included in personal interest, that includes grandchildren, and domestic partners.
Second.
it's been moved and properly second, so that recommendation is documented, I'll move it to our attorney.
Carry.
It-
All in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. And Ms. Luna will draft language for us to take a look at. All right.
Okay, I did have another question here. In terms of 402, we're talking about personal interest, and that's limited to really financial or economic ideas. But then we also have down in terms of acceptance of gratuities. So is that supposed to cover things beyond economic ideas?
What was the second thing you mentioned?
In 405, you have acceptance of gratuities. So is that supposed to cover the idea that someone gave something to someone and then someone exercised discretion on their behalf So should we be viewing the two of them together instead of separately in what they cover?
Okay, so 1402 is meant to be just the definition section, right? And then the items that the ethics committee covers, the things that are ethics violations are found in 403, 404, 405, 406, 407, 408, 409. Okay, so it's 403 through 409 are the ethics violations, and then 402 is the definition of personal interest and employment interest as they fit into those other 6 categories. Did I answer your question? I don't think I did.
Well, I think so. It's just that in some of these, they have other terms. I mean, what's the terms I looked at here? So like 405 has other considerations, and then 408 has privileges or exemptions not provided by law. So I'm just wondering, are those broad enough to cover other things beyond economic incentives for doing something?
Well, good question. Again, we adopted the state law, which, as Ron pointed out, is the floor. I will say this, that when an issue comes up, let's say somebody brings in an issue on 405, an ethics complaint comes to the ethics committee on 405. That ethics committee would sit there, and let's say that somebody received something other than money, right? And maybe it was sexual favors or something, odd like that. That's where that other consideration comes in. What we would do, you guys would discuss and say, does this fit the definition of other consideration? Okay. The city attorney would be at the meeting and then would go to the Tennessee case law that interprets this state law, right? And would come back and explain to you, here are the situations that have the Attorney General for the state of Tennessee's dealt with, or that the Tennessee Court of Appeals or the Tennessee Supreme Court has dealt with on this particular item, and then could give you some guidance. But it would be up to your interpretation as whether I think that other consideration is broad enough to cover everything else.
To know.
I've done the research on that. That other consideration has meant a lot of different strange things.
That's a good question. I think it's good that it's deliberately broad.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives you a little leeway.
Yeah, we can't imagine everything that could be the consideration.
Sure. I was just trying to make sure it was broad enough to cover that.
I believe it is.
There was another aspect to this. It's the phrase past action. I saw as kind of broad. 4 or 5. Okay, so in 4052, rewarding for past action. I would assume we're trying to limit this to action since the person has been exercising a position. And so as being broad, I noticed, should we do something like replace action with exercise of discretion, I think is what I saw in the model code of ethics.
The 405, 1 and 2 is meant to cover let's say councilperson A does something and they're doing it for a purpose to gain something for themselves, right? For personal interest. Okay. What 1 and 2 are meant to cover is whether that's given to them before they did their vote or whether it's given to them after they give their vote. So that's where 1 and 2 come in, to influence his action or reward him for past action. So that's why the past action's in there. So if the gift comes afterward, then
Right.
still covers.
Right, but the idea is past action to general, where it can cover stuff for a council person before they are elected. So do we need to say for past official action, past exercise of discretion, so that we're limiting it to the
Term of office.
term of office, or in the appointed position and they're doing something like that. So you understand the
Oh,
distinction
yeah, I
I'm
understand what you're
making?
saying. So in two, that might reasonably be interpreted as an attempt to influence his official action or reward him for official past official actions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure, I see your point, yeah.
So you agree with this point? Huh?
I think that, yes, I do agree.
Okay, I saw you say. So do we need a motion on that or what?
We do.
Okay, I so moved that we accept the
Before or after?
yeah, accept that terminology that was just stated by the.
So,
If she's inserting official in two places. So you would be inserting official in two.
Yeah, so official will be inserted in two places. I think that's what Councilman is saying, correct? Okay.
We have a motion.
Just to confirm, Teresa, do you think that those changes work with the applicability section? Because you're limiting it to only while they're essentially in office under their official duties, because it applies only to full and part-time or elected employees, right? So is that already covered under 401?
I think what Sean,
Yeah.
Dr. Evans is saying is that he doesn't want us to, let's say that Marta Wallace did something kind and took dinner to somebody, you know, that didn't have anything to do with her official action.
Right.
But, you know, or somebody took dinner to her when she had an injured shoulder, right?
Right.
That, you know,
Yeah.
it has to, I think what he's saying is, we want to make sure that it's limited to in
Yeah.
having an influence on their official actions and not other
I
actions.
just want to make sure that the language works holistically throughout the whole word, like that we.
What are you worried about?
I think the way you just explained it there works with 401.
Well, I'll just say this, the state, well, it's the Municipal Technical Advisory
MTS.
Service.
MTS, yeah.
Yeah, MTS, their wording, they've got a model code of ethics, and their wording was exercise of discretion. And so I think they were trying to use, and we've got action, and so I don't know, still the idea is I think we want to limit it to their use of their official power, discretion, however you want to look at it, whether it's official, exercise of discretion.
I think that's where it comes in when you all first see it, then you know if it's really something of importance or not. Then you would dig in there and say, oh, that person, she did have a hurt shoulder, but there wasn't a vote or anything in the past 6 months. Or if there came something in the future, then maybe you could go back to it. But I think that's where you all would see if it was something to pursue or not to pursue.
Are you saying that an attempt to influence his official discretion rather than action?
Well, just, I think whether it's official action or maybe exercise of discretion, I think they're kind of the same things, aren't they? I mean, it's just a matter of, since the model code of ethics said exercise of discretion, I'm just wondering if that's a better phrase.
Discretion speaks more specifically to decision making. You know, you make ethical decisions based upon the fact that there's no opportunity for you to receive favors based on your actions.
It's harder for a committee to look at somebody's discretion than it is for the committee to look at somebody's action.
Correct.
Okay.
So would you be in favor of changing that to be more
Official action.
official actions?
Which section is that again? Ms. Plexi?
4052.
4052.
We're looking to insert the word official. Is that what we're looking to do? Is that what we're agreeing to? Inserting the word official in two places? Is that what we're
That's what I've
agreeing
got down, that you wanted me to.
Yeah.
Okay.
to? And where are the two places that we're inserting the word official?
Just past, between past and action in 4052.
That's one place. And then what's the
Was
second
there
place?
another place?
right before action.
Official influence, his official action, or
Yes.
reward him for, official past actions, that's what we're doing.
Do you want to restate that motion?
Yeah, I move that we recommend to the city council that, section 1-45-2 be extended to include the words official, at the appropriate, place.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And, are there other concerns or consideration?
I'm sorry, I know y'all were hoping to get through it a little bit quicker.
Yeah,
so-
No,
they were,
that's
I was-
good.
I was hoping that.
Richard
Yeah, so,
always,
I mean,
Richard will say we're dismissed
I
before
kind of
anybody else says.
apologize.
Hang in there. Richard.
But going through the model code of ethics, I noticed that this would apply to 410. It has a provision in that says the interpretation that a reasonable person in the circumstances would apply shall be used in interpreting and enforcing this code of ethics. So the idea is that would be the guidance that the ethics committee would use, would be the reasonable person standard idea in trying to figure out whether this is or not a ethics violation. So the idea is that at least gives them some limits potentially on how they view this, and I think we'd probably go beyond a strictly legal aspect, because some things can be legal but unethical.
What
So
section is that?
Yeah. what's the
section 410, I just noticed in the model code of ethics that it did have this provision that the interpretation should be based on what a reasonable person.
What's the subsection, Doctor?
Well, there isn't a subsection in this, in the model code of ethics.
Oh,
It's-
you're talking
it's,
about
it's subsection 3. So I'm just wondering, why is it not in there? Because if you look at the model code of ethics, it's this minus the 410, where there is a committee that investigates this. In the model code of ethics, it's the city attorney. So since there's so much duplication between the model code of ethics and this, I'm just wondering why it's not in there, and should it be in there?
Can you give me an example? Are you talking about before it comes to you, the person that originally looks at it?
No, the idea
see.
that the committee, in trying to determine whether
If
this is
it's-
a violation or not, would
Okay.
use a reasonable person standard. The idea is, would a reasonable person believe that this would be unethical?
Okay. I'm trying to go back and.
Well, we've seen the needle move a little bit on that reasonable person definition, so.
It's changing all the time, isn't it?
Well, but if you look at the legal perspective, okay, so I'm teaching con law, I'm sorry, I'm bringing stuff up, but the idea in Miller v. California, dealing with obscenity, it goes with contemporary community standards, which is what would a jury decide? The idea of the reasonable person standard would be is, would 2/3 of the committee think that's reasonable? Would be, I think, how that would be interpreted.
So what phrase or what words would you want to be determined?
It's a standard.
Right there,
Should
3, if you can read that.
Read that
Or
aloud, please.
the interpretation that a reasonable person in the circumstances will apply shall be used in interpreting and enforcing code ethics. The interpretation that a reasonable person in the circumstances will apply shall be used. So what a reasonable person would, that would be the standard, a reasonable person.
So, is there a definition of a reasonable person?
There is in the law, that's Tennessee case law, and generally, reasonable person standard is an implication in everything that, a city does. You know, when you're looking at whether a person should have done something differently, you're supposed to use a reasonable person standard, but it certainly doesn't hurt to put it in there.
It's fine.
I think that's
Common sense.
fine. Yeah. Either, putting in.
It's like a reasonable person standard. If I hear thundering outside and everybody comes in, they got umbrellas, it's wet, somebody got a raincoat on, it's wet, a reasonable person would say it's raining. Not that somebody went through, they all walked through a sprinkler and got wet.
It's a little bit different. It's like, if let's say, Richard, I sue you for something, right? And I say you acted inappropriately somewhere, okay? So then the court is supposed to use a reasonable person standard in looking at what you did, okay? Is it reasonable for Richard, or is it reasonable for, a 12-year-old, or, reasonable person standard means what a typical adult would do in that typical situation, right? Not what that person necessarily did, not what a child would do, or not what an unstable person would do, but what would a reasonable person do in that situation. So that's, I think what Sean is saying to the group is that it would be good for the ethics committee to have a reasonable person standard, meaning when they look at what somebody did, is this what a reasonable person would do in this particular situation?
Couldn't you just put the reasonable person definition right there in
Yeah,
there?
I mean, I'm not telling you what to do, but maybe the language that's in the model code be inserted into our code on reasonable.
Also move, we recommend to the city council that the language included in the model code, what you call it, what's the specific name?
Reasonable persons.
No, what's the model code? Is that the name of
Yeah,
it?
it's the.
That's okay, don't worry about it.
I got it pulled out yet. It's MTAS's model code of ethics.
Okay, that's good. That the language stated in that be adopted by the city and that the appropriate statute be amended to include that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. That's all right. Are there other concerns?
Okay, I'm sorry, number 4. And this is a quick question. I know it's common for elected officials to file annual disclosure statements. Do we require our elected officials to do that? That seems like something that could forestall.
The state does. State requires that.
So,
Yeah, we don't.
The state does.
So that's already done.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Most of
All right.
Okay. All right. Any other concerns or questions?
I was not here. I had to leave early last time. What did we say about there was discussion going on about gratuities? For instance, somebody takes me to lunch and pay for my lunch. Do I is that improper for me to go to lunch with them? What do you all say about that? I'm not making a motion that we amend anything, but just what did you all say about that?
I don't think
We
it's
discussed
good, and I've had that case, and it was a builder, it was a contractor, and I made it upfront that I'm happy to meet with them, but they could not buy my lunch or anything, because there were even people when I was walking out say, "Oh, I saw you get your credit card out by," and I said, "That was for me." And when I came on to city council, I was told, don't take a ham, so I think it's better just to clean cut nothing. If they take you to lunch, that could be perceived as them talking to you about a particular vote that could be coming up.
But that's what politicians do all the time. It's obvious, carry them to lunch and stuff.
Well,
But I'm not
they have the
advocating that we
trip,
do
too,
it.
and if you
I'm
want
just
to go on a big trip, I'll be with you, but well, consequences later.
so it's legal to do that as long as you disclose it. Is that right?
No, not
No.
at the state.
What?
No.
What does the state say?
The code says that you can't accept it in exchange for something else, or if it could be reasonably interpreted that you took it for that reason.
Okay.
And I can tell you at the state level, as a state lobbyist cannot take you out to lunch or buy you anything. They can give you an award for like an action, like to commemorate you or anything like that. They can also for informational purposes, like to a conference if they invite every elected official at the state legislature. But you cannot give them like a stick of gum or anything like that.
Right. I just wondered about that. Okay, thank you.
You don't want to compromise yourself in any way. Yes.
Chairman, number 9, and this is just something I've been thinking about on, page, is it 410 and 49? When we first started this was not included, and what I'm getting at is if a person's running from office, it says that we cannot accept any complaints directed at that person. I think it's 3 months before. Christie, where is that in there? I've got-
This says,
That's 410 subsection 9.
yes.
Yes.
It says, during a period from the last day on which a person may qualify as a candidate until after 11:59 PM of the following election day.
I just kind of have mixed feelings on that because I think we've changed that because at the end of when we had a lot of complaints, there were a lot of frivolous things. Well, she owns the house and the property that she lives on. So we took that out. So I think it's still up to the ethics committee if something really came up that they would determine if it's an ethical issue or not. Why is the reason that we took it out if we look at things and we know they're frivolous, and they know they don't have any merit, then it just never comes up. It's just something I wanted to discuss a little bit.
So you're saying if it was a legitimate
If it's something
issue, they should
legitimate
still be able to bring it
Correct.
regardless of the time frame.
timeline. Yeah, because if somebody's just wanting to throw mud on someone, then it should not go any further. Then the first person that looks at it throws it out, might not ever even go to you. So it's just something I thought about. What is the real, I just would like a little discussion. What is it? Why?
So I think the concern is that someone would run saying, say Councilwoman Marta has several ethics complaints filed against her. And so the idea is not, the person will just say filed ethics complaint, and the average person will say, oh, Ms. Wallace is correct.
And
She's committing an ethical.
the other consideration too is every complaint that's filed, even if it's determined to not have merit, is a record that is created as well.
That's what, okay.
So I can tell you at the state level, for example, there are kind of closeouts. I don't know on the ethics file, but like even referencing an elected official's name in like materials and stuff for this very reason. So.
Okay, all right, so that makes sense. That's why I wanted clarification on that. Okay, thank you.
Well, I have a follow-up question on that, because that's another thing I looked at. I was thinking in the terms of the Department of Justice will not make announcements about prosecutions or anything so much time before an election. But I was interested in what the time from election day and filing is. You said it's 3 months. So
I thought that's what we had discussed here a couple
So
of years ago.
part of my question is
Well,
that
do you
that could
remember?
also lead people
I thought
to
it
file
was.
complaints before that 3-month thing. And so part of what I'm wondering from the ethics committee perspective is if there's a complaint, do we have to hear it within a certain amount of time?
I believe that is part of the ordinance, isn't that, Teresa?
Is that-
This says last day
Well,
until 11:59 of the
No,
following.
he's saying when one is submitted, do they have to?
Outside of the 3-month window.
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing is 60 days is
It's still
still,
within the framework of what we agreed upon.
right, so that could be 60 days of waiting and so is there something to where we need to deal with it in a more expedient manner in, say, an election year, or change? I mean, because you don't want someone to go 3 years into 5 days and then 60 days of saying there's an ethics complaint filed against Councilman so-and-so.
I think we could look at a proviso, in the event of an upcoming election, because that would need to be addressed or resolved, because it is a part of the record once it's filed. And it could be negatively interpreted and used against that particular candidate.
I don't know if this helps with clarity. I think this timing or time frame was put in place on which the person may qualify. That was like the time when you get the signatures and your name is going to be on the ballot, whether you decide to run or not, and then gets us through what the elections in June or that's announced, right? They're made and takes office on June 1st. Or no, I guess
There's a runoff and then.
Yeah, if it got us through, yeah.
If there's a runoff.
Yeah, I think that was the intent, was to protect that time period. But I see what you're saying, and like, if you really wanted to finagle with the timing, I guess, if you were, yeah.
I mean, y'all have more experience running for office and dirty tricks or such. Is that something to where you're concerned with? Or due to changes we see in politics, is that something you think could be a concern to where we would want to handle this more expeditiously in an election year?
I don't have a thought one way or the other, but a couple of facts I'll throw out. Prior to this being, having to sign an affidavit and disclosing who you are to make the complaint, the city saw a great deal more of, political based, I guess that's what we call them, political based complaints, because then they didn't have to put their name down. Since it's, not anonymous anymore, there have been, very few of those types of complaints. So I think this is more important if you want to go back to making it where somebody can make an anonymous, then you might really want to protect that period a lot more. But since it's not anonymous, it's not as big of an issue. Ross, would you agree?
Yeah,
Marta, would you agree? Richard?
Yeah, at the end, that is the reason why we had to stop it. For, I think I had one, I own my house. I mean, it just got to where every single council member had something. But I do understand now, my question was answered because I thought before things would come to our internal auditor, she would review them, and if there was nothing, if it was did not have any merit, no one knew about it. But that's not correct. So that answered my question. But as far as the timeline, I'm not certain, so that needs more discussion.
How feasible would it be to just insert that timeline so that you could, just be very aware of the time for qualifying?
I'm not sure. What is is it 3 months prior, Brian?
3 months, I remember, was what we.
That's the qualification. So right now, what we have in there is shall not accept any complaints during the period from the last day on which a person may qualify as a candidate until the day after the election. That's a 3-month period, right?
That's what we talked about. I just remember that's.
Is it the qualifying
It's
date
not in
like
there, but that's what.
It may be in January.
I think it's a little longer than 3
Maybe
months.
it's 5, maybe it's a 5.
Because I think it's like the qualifying date is the day that those signatures has to be submitted,
Yeah,
and your name is either going to be or not be on the ballot. That's the qualifying date.
so there is a
And then
timeline in there.
There's whether it's defined here or not, there is an actual timeline that I guess
It references a timeline somewhere else. I'm pulling up the Board of Elections to see if it.
Should we just insert that in there?
Yeah, I think it comes from the charter, actually, doesn't it, Brian?
You're
It's
right.
in there.
If you want to move on, I'll pull up the charter.
Right.
My question was answered, thank you, and we can research.
I think January 1st is the first day you can file to run for office. And it runs through April and May. So
Okay.
Okay. So, once we find that timeline, I think it would be reasonable to just insert that in that language so that everything is there and everything is contained. So we can take a look at that as well. Okay. one of the things that we had talked about, I completely agree that we need safeguards, guardrails, in terms of individuals who want to file a complaint that might be politically motivated. I think that's very reasonable to have those guidelines in place. I think it would be good if we had a two-tiered or two-track system so that employees, who might want to file an ethics complaint, and we know that every complaint that comes from an employee is not an ethics complaint, but if they had a specific ethics complaint, that they'd be able to file that initially anonymously. And then once internal audit or wherever it goes, and then we would have a determination of where it goes. I think at one point it went to internal audit, comptroller, city attorney. But so that employees could initially file that anonymous complaint, have an investigation to see if there's validity to it, and then once it's determined that there's validity, it would become a confidential matter while it's being investigated. But hopefully that would alleviate any fear of reprisal on the front end if an employee had a legitimate complaint. And the fact that they would know, and it would be specifically stated that if there was a determination that further investigation was needed, then they would have to be identified and their information kept confidential. I think that would dissuade them, from retaliatory or frivolous complaints. It's something I'd like for us to consider as a part of this.
One thing, just to throw out, the anonymity of the person, I think is what you're saying is important, especially for city employees. Would, in your suggestion, would anyone at the city have knowledge of who that city employee is?
I think that's the piece that we would need to work out so that, they could be completely comfortable. And I know that at one point we had a system where, people could file a complaint anonymously on that system. Mm-hmm. That's no longer in place, but I think Ron has worked really hard to make sure that there is a route for people to make complaints. But so that's something we might need to work through, how we could do that anonymously on the front end.
So I will say, and Teresa, you can probably obviously speak more to this than I am. I don't know. There's always a limitation of open records laws, and so
that's the problem.
That's
right.
what we had talked about, I guess.
Yeah. So people can, for example, employees can submit a complaint that's non-ethical based to Kelsey, and she investigates and all that, and obviously she has her processes and everything. In terms of a specific under the ethics ordinance, I don't know how you verify that someone's an employee without having a document or something like that then creates a record that cannot be kept from an Open Records Act. So
does it have to be an employee? I mean, could you not have the anonymity piece for everyone? That would get around.
That.
Is it an employee or not?
It was an outside company. People would go on, evidently. I'm going to say strongly that I feel that employees need to have the ability, if there is something really going on, they might not feel comfortable going to their boss. And I would feel more comfortable, Kelsey, talking to this matter, but I just think that we need to protect our employees if there's something going on that they want to either go to someone and talk about or lodge something, that they should be able to do that without fear of losing their job. So I think that was the main thing that this whole discussion was about.
I know there's a federal Whistleblowers Protection Act in process. Does the state?
The state has the Tennessee Public Protection Act, which is the whistleblower protection.
And would that apply to this? So, but in that case, it would be filed with the state and then?
No, the Tennessee Public Protection Act covers an employee who, let's say, let's say Kelsey wants to go report somebody, one of her superiors, and she does that, and it's, based on this ethics code. And then she turns around 2 weeks later and they say, well, Kelsey, we're firing you because, some bogus reason. Then, then she can go and sue.
Okay, right, but I believe the
That's what it
federal
is.
whistleblower process has an anonymous option for it. So
There's
does
a
the
False Claim Act, that's the federal
Okay,
version of that, which typically is if you know that the federal government is being defrauded by someone, you can go, I just finished a case like this, where you
Okay.
can go and you can take that and you file it under seal with the federal court in your district, and you make that report and you turn it over to the U.S. attorney for your district, and then it is investigated while it's under seal, and they don't know that you're the one who, eventually they will know, but during the investigation process, they don't know who you are.
okay,
That's a False Claim Act.
right,
So it's not really
right,
ethics.
there's
things.
nothing, well, but is there a process? If you're looking for a process,
Yeah.
would something like that be something to model it upon, because there's at least been experience with that adapted to the city level?
What Christy brought up, what she shared with you at the beginning, the state comptroller's office
Yeah.
has the means for somebody to make that kind of report.
I guess my question, sorry,
No, we had suggested, Ron and I talked to just establish a link on the city's website
Mhm.
to that. So that people can, people in Jackson can go directly there and lodge a complaint. But it would be the comptroller's fraud, waste, and abuse.
So what if it's not fraud, waste, and abuse? That's been in our discussions earlier.
Well, I
And
guess
that's one of
that's
the
the
gaps.
question. Yeah, I'm trying to figure if, because we've established we've got these three lanes running parallel. You've got the comptroller's office. Anybody, citizen, elected official, city employee can access that, file a complaint anonymously. You've got HR for employee situations, and we talked about the challenges of making that an anonymous situation, but you reassured us that it's all confidential, right? There's a difference in confidentiality and anonymity. And then we've got the ethics committee with, that people can report, misuse by elected officials or anybody in ethics. I guess those running parallel I'm trying to think of like the example where what would fall through those three. Like what example would not get caught, I guess, or dealt with in those three? Because I think what I'm hearing, you're trying to say, like, there needs to be another path or system, I guess.
It would be the employee who wants to make an anonymous complaint, or who wants to make a complaint and not fear the process.
That could be discrimination. That could be different forms of harassment.
But are they not covered under what?
The Tennessee
They're not
comptroller.
covered under ethics.
Yeah.
They're not covered under the fraud, waste, and abuse with the comptroller. But
Or the law that?
and those of you on the ethics committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the ethics committee came up with their policy, they discussed this and said, well, let's say that you're being sexually abused by your boss, what avenue do you have? So the ethics committee made a recommendation to the city that they had an anonymous reporting procedure for employees because that's not on those paths. That you
And that
just
was the
mentioned.
whole thing that we've talked about for months. So I do feel strongly on that. Hopefully it will never happen, but we want to keep our city employees and everybody needs to feel
Teresa,
they can be heard.
question for you. I know we used that platform for a while, and then there was obviously unintended consequences that made us change the ordinance of today. Can the city outsource its records obligations to a third party? Because I think that's the other concern.
Corporations do all the time, and I'm not sure if we can, other than just where they're just the interceptor of the complaint, and then that complaint gets directed back to us. But then, what do you really gain? What does the employee really gain from that?
Right.
Okay, let me understand your question, because I'm understanding how it worked before. It was, I understood that it was a button or somewhere on,
It's a
I believe, the
form.
city auditor. They filled it out, and the third party got it, but no one else knew who it was. And then the city auditor had to look into it and see if there was merit. And then I believe it went to the mayor, chief of staff.
Did the third party know who it was?
The third party had the name, but they could never disclose it. So again, to me, on this committee, I just want to see that everyone has the ability to feel heard without consequences. And everybody doesn't have the ability to maybe hire an attorney, they don't want to. Hopefully it's not happening, but again, if we're going through this, I thought that was the main reason. We want people to feel like they can express themselves without the consequences. Then if it is bad enough, then they say, yes, I can openly come forward.
And at that point, it would still be confidential. Yeah.
So I guess
HR and whomever.
would this be handled within the ethics committee or
Or
a
if it's
different?
an ethics.
I hear you asking for something before it gets to the ethics committee. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yes, they need to have a form or something to turn it in, to hold their, that they do not want to, and then it can come to the committee. And if they see merit in it, then maybe that person would have,
The only way the committee gets it though is if it's notarized, or if they formally acknowledge that they're notarized, they go through this process.
I think
I
what
hear
she's
you
talking
asking for
about.
something that precedes that allows them to do it anonymously, correct?
right, right.
And change the
And
ordinance.
we did have that, it was a third party.
If that's the case, could you
That's
have
what I
a
mean.
subset of the ethics committee screen them confidentially?
Yes,
Is that an option?
it needs to be something.
It's the Open Records,
Right.
the Open Records Act. That-
Yeah, you.
That's throwing the wrench in the wheel of
I
everything that
think
you're
it's gonna-
saying.
yeah.
What is an open records? I thought it only applied to officials, people elected.
Every city employee.
Everything.
Everything.
Everything the city
Yeah,
does, you know, there are limited exceptions. For example, in the
My
employees.
address is as a city employee is exempt, but basically my Post-it notes on my desk, if you wanted to request it, I would have to give you a picture of every Post-it note on my desk.
Okay.
Literally
Emails,
everything that any
everything is
official or employee creates in their course of duty.
Not their social security number, not their
Right.
address, you know,
Okay.
but
Emails, everything is discoverable.
Okay, well, I just, Kelsey, do you have, I just thought that was the whole thing for months we've been talking about, that we want to waive
Yeah,
employees.
I guess,
That's understandable.
yeah, I'm trying to understand, make sure it's really two separate processes. Now, for you all, for employees or anyone to have ethical concerns, I think that's the avenue, I guess maybe you all are trying to figure out.
Fine.
For confident or anonymity complaints for employees, for internal things, sexual abuse, different things like that. Is that the question that you're asking particular to
Yes.
those instances? Okay. I mean, of course,
There
there
wasn't an avenue for the terminology that we heard.
true.
There wasn't harassment, discrimination, those things, it seemed, were lacking.
Okay. So I guess what my question would be maybe for Teresa, if we establish what a third party, currently our current system does not, and it's later on the agenda, but I can speak to it. Our current system does not have the opportunity today to collect anonymous complaints, not via phone or via email. We have the capability to manage the case, put in interview notes, people were involved, but that's more of an internal process. I guess my question would be, in the event we were to outsource to a third party, still with the same notion of they're not aware of who the individual is, they just collecting the information and giving it to us. I'm assuming that's still subject to open records, although the record that we have and that the third party has is still the name not included. Is that possible?
yes, most of these companies that handle third parties, most of them, all they do is just get the first initial report, right? And then they turn it over to the company or whatever. It's just a a fact gathering. There's no investigation by them.
Right.
You know, without a lot of money being spent and, you know, them having to come here and do it. So, okay, so talking about not ethics, right? We're talking about what Kelsey's talking about now, and that is the reporting of, you know, sexual abuse or, you know, something like that that's not contained in the ethics code. That's what the ethics committee recommended to the city way back then, before your timeline, that they develop a process for that type of reporting to be done. And I don't think that was recommended before your time, but I don't think that's been done. I think that would solve a lot of the issues that I'm hearing.
Okay, so then we can't resolve that right now, right? Everybody, we can't resolve that now?
I said, you know,
I'm
that
gonna
can
move that we table it
happen.
to some other time.
That can happen just by you guys making a recommendation to the mayor's office.
Yeah,
all right.
And I guess that is not to say that that's not an important thing, because it definitely is. But I think my question is, does that fall under the purview of this audit committee? Because we're charged, right, to make sure that the ethics committee is up and running and running accordingly. But is that more of like a city council, HR, mayor conversation?
No, I think
Other
that's.
than the audit committee?
That's.
I'm gonna say that we are responsible, that we should have gone through I'm gonna say that we are responsible for saying we are lacking in that area.
When you say
The
we,
audit
do it,
committee.
we.
Yeah.
Well, that the ethics committee is lacking in that area
But
and
we're
that
not
we need
the
to have a tool. But
The
as
audit committee's responsibility is to recommend that the
Right.
process be put in place.
According to the ethics committee though, right?
But the
According
ethics
to the
committee's already done it, right?
Right.
They've already made the recommendation, so the recommendation's still sitting there. So I mean, I think it may be
They make the recommendation to who?
to the mayor's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so our responsibility would be to make a recommendation that be reviewed and adopted, because there's a need for that. You know, we've spent months studying it. We want to be very careful, you know, to make sure that, you know, we didn't leave any stone unturned, and we've done that.
Right.
And so there's a very significant gap in the reporting ability, and really amounts to protection of our employees, city employees, and that needs to be addressed.
Ron and Kelsey and I just left the policy committee, right? And every month the policy committee meets. There could be, Ron, a policy that this committee gets together. It's a great group of city people. They develop a policy on how someone may report these non-ethics related issues. I think that would be a good one.
And I guess that's what I got. Yeah, we've done a lot of due diligence and discussion on it. I think that's where at this point, I'm trying to figure out what else other than recommending that, like what else can the audit committee do?
Well, we're a recommending
regard.
body, so it's our responsibility to make that recommendation and try to work with the administration to make sure that's enforced. It's been on the books for a while, and that's why we wanted to meet with the ethics committee, to make sure we're all on the same page. And I think clearly we are, in respects to that. And so, you know, our recommendation, and we need the full recommendation that the ethics committee had made earlier. Our recommendation is that be enforced, that we move towards, hopefully expeditiously, identifying a vehicle, you know, for employees or others to make anonymous complaints, and clearly establishing what that process is. And then building in safeguards, you know, to dissuade, you know, frivolous complaints or politically motivated complaints. So, you know, that's what we're looking for. That's the recommendation that I'd like to posit from this group. We would need a second to just move forward with that. And then if we need to identify another third-party vendor to make sure that they receive those complaints, the mayor's office would communicate, you know, how the ethics complaint process would flow, whether when they come from that third party, they go to internal audit, comptroller's office, city attorney, legal, that's a.
And this is to confirm non-ethics related complaints, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make sure we understand this. So this is for HR-driven internal complaints, not
Everything
people-
other than ethics.
Okay, okay.
right?
Is that something you all wanted to explore? I mean, how are you all okay with your processes as far as with the notarized signatures and different things like that? Are you all trying to
That's
combine
that
them
maybe where
together?
I'm a little.
Yeah, that's why I'm
confused.
confused.
I'm getting confused.
Yeah,
on
we
this.
are.
Yeah.
If it flows, I think I understand where it's lacking, right? If we have a non-ethics complaint by an employee, how does that get processed? Am I right there?
If it's not ethics, it would be
It'll
through
come through
HR.
human resources.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But what we're talking about are ethical complaints.
Okay, so yeah.
And that would
Yeah.
not already go through the ethics committee then?
Would.
It
Right.
would.
But then we're trying to
Suggesting-
solve the,
The thought here is that there needs to be some vehicle for them to, city employees to file anonymously
Correct.
without fear of reprisal.
Ethics.
and I think that's what I
Ethics
don't,
complaints,
I
yeah.
don't know what the
Okay.
answer is.
Yeah, but that's what we've been talking about for
Right.
months.
Right, and I think
Right.
we keep running
And
into,
that's what I think we keep
unfortunately,
coming
roadblocks of, when you have a official city board or commission, it is subject to open records, right? And so how do you square that round peg, or square peg in a round hole,
Yes.
so.
So the problem, prior to this, having to sign the affidavit, the problem before was that 90% plus of the ethics complaints that came in were not discernible. We couldn't tell what they meant, what the person had done wrong, the person who was investigating didn't know where to look or what to do, and yet they couldn't go back to the person to get more information, and so they would, I'm saying like 90% of them were, they think they're telling you enough, but you don't have enough to go on to even do a proper investigation. So that was a problem, but here's the intersection of, the problem and another problem is once the person gives somebody in the city their name, then it's subject to the Open Records Act. And let's say, Mark, can I use you an example?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say there's a complaint against MARTA and it's,
I harass all the time.
yeah. Anyway, let's say there's a complaint against MARTA and only one person in the city knows who made that. MARTA can still do an open records request even as, as a council person and ask, for that and see it. The WBBJ can come and do it and post that name, even though just one person knows. So it either has to be completely anonymous if you want it to keep anonymity, or it's got to be.
But if you
You
do
got
that,
another
you
name.
yourself back up to the initial, and then we have to do some filing with for this complaints, so you just have to.
Wanting something anonymous.
Which is why we.
I don't think if you initially allow it to be anonymous, but, once it gets to
For months.
internal audit and where they see there's significant evidence or they need to investigate, then I think you would need to be able to gather the information and keep it confidential or as confidential as you can.
The challenge was initially the challenge in part was when you would receive a complaint though at the ethics committee and it was an anonymous complaint, there was no person to go back to.
Right.
So even if there was some investigation done and you needed more information, before you went forward formally asking them to put their name on something, there was no one to go back to at that point. So it was just kind of you're doing this investigative process and due diligence without the capacity to continue to move forward.
So I'll just throw this out. Can we ask them to make up a Gmail account that doesn't have any identifying information that you could communicate and get follow-up information? Gmail, Yahoo, someone, if that's a problem.
Mr. Chairman.
And just assign a case number, rather than their name, so that you're not identifying a person. It could just be, complaint number, whatever, or case number, whatever.
Can I make a recommendation? Through these third-party systems, that is how they function. Like, these are trained on the phone, these are trained individuals who understand investigations to ask the right questions to get as much information as they can to propose to the client, hey, this is what you have. Historically, how they communicate back and forth is through a portal where the employee logs in and they have, again, just identifier as a case number or unique type ID. So that's what the third party facilitator, that's their responsibility. These are trained individuals over the phone. They ask the pertinent questions, who was there, get all this information and relay that to the client. That's how it works. So it is a possibility.
So the suggestion on the table is for a two-track system, one for employees that allows them to utilize a third party, file anonymously, and then we'll maintain the current system that we have that allows for citizens to file their complaint, but their complaint has to be within a particular framework of time. And they have to establish that.
Yeah, I would like, Mr. Chairman, for Tawanica or our internal auditor, because she was here and, could at least explain what that third party did for the city. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. The third, are you referring to the anonymous portal that we?
Correct.
Okay, so we used, previously in the past, we used a system called Ethical Advocate, and it was a totally anonymous system. Anyone could create a login, citizen or employee, and lodge a complaint, put all of their details in the system. Once that complaint was lodged, it went to designated people throughout the city to handle. If it was an HR issue, we would forward it to HR. If it was a police issue, we would forward it to police. There was no way to respond back to the individual who lodged the complaint. Once they lodged it, it was done. So we had no way of informing them of the disposition of the complaint. We would just have to take the information that they supplied in that initial complaint and work with it from that point. Sometimes they were full of details, attachments, proof of emails, dates, times, and so forth that would give us something to actually work on to prove that this was a valid complaint. And sometimes they were very vague, which didn't give us, a lot to work on, and they would have to be dismissed.
But you're saying there are
platforms that have that.
Well, then maybe.
You just may need to find another provider. Yeah.
So
I still think we have a question of,
Yeah.
Can we actually legally do that?
Yeah, that's the legal question. I don't know the answer to that. I can find out.
Yeah, because we have legal obligations as a city to maintain our records, so we just have to.
I understand.
I guess it's can we delegate that duty to a third party?
Okay.
So certain duties we can.
Your argument though is still always subject to this Open Records Act,
Right.
even if you delegate it to a third party.
Yeah, because they're acting on our behalf typically.
Exactly. Their records are our records.
Right.
But if they don't know,
Right.
then nobody knows.
Right. And it goes back to what Sean just mentioned. Could we have a system whereby somebody could, just have a Gmail, a new Gmail, and somebody who's tech savvy, that works, but some grandmother who, some of my friends couldn't do that. Some of my fellow grandmothers wouldn't be able to do that, but yes, that would work.
Okay, so we could pose a recommendation that we investigate a third-party vendor that will be able to provide initial anonymous recording systems, and we would understand that legal would investigate to see, if we could do that within the parameters of state law and open records. And then, hopefully, we would be able to have that two-track system so that, if in the gathering of information, we found that there was validity to the complaints that warranted further investigation, that individual would be assigned a case number or something on the front end until that information is gathered. But so that we move forward with the provision of an opportunity for employees or other individuals to make that initial anonymous complaint. If we agree to that recommendation, then we would need to look at amending the ordinance so that it would allow for anonymous complaints, because as it stands now, it does not.
I want clarification, and we're talking only for the ethics. So if it's an ethics complaint, employees, this is what we're talking about. Now, if it's an HR issue, something that's non-ethical, it's not gonna be anonymous.
No, they would go
Correct.
through the HR process, whatever that current process is.
Mhm.
Does that allow for?
Is that what you all were?
I just was wanting to know, what we're
Okay.
talking about is strictly gonna be for ethics complaints for employees. We're not addressing the HR type of issues with employees within what we're discussing right now.
I'm gonna yield Councilman Mark. I think that's what you were wanting. You were wanting it both. I think it's
Well,
okay for us to
I
have
think it's-
potentially both.
The whole last 3 months, the reason that we started this was we felt there was not a tool, that there was something lacking. So am I in agreement that that's what we've been talking about? So,
A tool that would allow city employees to file anonymous complaints. That's the discussion that was.
yes,
Ethical complaint.
Anonymous
Yes.
ethical complaints.
Correct.
Okay.
Just city employees or anyone?
well, I think the thing is, we felt like that there was a gap in city employees.
But if you put that system in place, anyone.
It relatively for anyone.
Yeah.
Well, if you put that place and you afford anyone the opportunity, then you undermine the ordinance at the moment that you already have and said that they have to utilize this particular process that requires them to not only establish their name, but also have it notarized. So you've undermined that.
Right,
So
and
you'd
that's,
have to go back and amend this entire process if you want to do that.
right, that's what we were saying. If we do that, then you're gonna have to amend that ordinance.
Yeah, I think what Freeman's is pointing out is a good point, and that is, you know, if we're gonna need to get back in touch with them, then that identifying information is always an open record, right?
Always.
So it's not always, so it's not really anonymous.
Ever.
I may suggest a favorite economist of mine, Thomas Sowell, has a line of there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And so any course of action you have here is going to cause problems on the other end, right? So if you want to keep it as narrowly tailored as possible, is a anonymous ethics complaint process for employees that changes the smallest bucket and creates the least unintended consequences the other way. Because if you go to the ethics, the anonymous complaints back to, if you allow it for everybody, would swing back to the pendulum that caused you to
Create the community.
yeah, and create the current process that you have now. So if that's what you want us to narrowly laser in on and see if that is even possible, we can try and see if the platform allows for that or whatnot.
What is the comptroller's, the one that goes to the comptroller, but that does not say ethics, is that correct?
Well, I guess
It would cover everything.
It would cover.
Everything
I mean,
in ethics.
It would cover ethics?
because
Well,
of use.
Okay,
Yeah.
then,
I mean, that's an ethical.
okay. But again, I'm just going back to, I thought that was our whole thing we've been discussing for months, was to find the two.
That's their only true way of anonymity is going through the comptroller, and the comptroller is Johnny on the spot on these.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna get handled.
All right, so where are we?
So we need a recommendation if we want to move forward, and I understand that there's one on the table someplace from the ethics committee originally.
That dealt with non-ethics issues.
Okay.
Okay, that one has already been,
Okay.
recommended to the mayor's office, non-ethics issues. And to come up with a procedure, and
Okay.
personally, I think the policy committee would do a great
Thank you for that.
group.
So we need a recommendation for third-party vendor.
Tell you what, let me interrupt a minute.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we, and I defer to you to articulate the rest of my motion. I move that we,
Here's your chance. You say, no.
Thank you. I'm in shock. That's why I'm hesitating. He's never given me that platform before. I thank you for that.
While
That we identify.
Before I go forward, I will just read the definition of abuse according to the comptroller, that maybe this solves the problem. Behavior involving the use of government funds or property that a prudent person would not consider reasonable and necessary business practice given the facts and all circumstances. I don't know how it's clear as mud.
That's why we have talked about this.
Right.
So
That we identify a third-party vendor that will allow anonymous complaints for employees, ethical complaints for employees. to lodge those. And we understand that if there is validity and there needs to be follow-up, then there will be another system that would help us to identify those so that they would come to the internal audit comptrollers, the city recorder's office, city attorney for further investigation.
And just a little discussion, I think what Ms. Merriweather said earlier, these people are trained and they could say, I'm sorry, but there's no validity to this, it could stop right there.
Right.
But at least it would allow that employee to voice and then say, no, that's not.
Well, let me
So
be
these
clear,
are
they won't test the validity, they're just information gatherers.
Yeah.
But they're trained to ask specific questions of
Okay.
who was there, what time, maybe real pertinent details that may have been missed if somebody's just typing into a system.
The way the code reads now, that third party would then submit to Ms. McKinney, and then she would submit it to the chairman of the ethics committee, and then the ethics committee would take over at that particular time.
And that's what they did before.
Right. So is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Been moved and properly second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Who was the first on that? I'm sorry, I missed the first.
Is there any unreadiness, any questions? If not? Ayes have it.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you very much. All right, and we kind of went out of order. I think Ms. Merriweather has shared. Do you have additional information you want to share?
No, that's all I had. Reached out to units and they fortunately don't have the platform to support a lot of these complaints. Have reached out to some of my colleagues, other HR directors within the city to see what they're doing. They're having similar conversations, but I haven't heard a response just yet. I just did that this morning. So, we can, keep moving ahead and, I'm looking to identify what a third-party system may look like.
Okay. So that would be our next step, to identify that third-party system that we want to utilize.
I can take care of it for you if you'd like.
All right, and so, Mr. Gunnell's committee had drafted some, reporting forms that we can share, to, just help gather information and to share that with the third party vendors.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes.
I have a personal deposition that I have to go take, and I have the excuse with me.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you
we're
for
done
your-
anyways, right?
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, unless there's, is there any other, business that needs to come before this committee?
No, ma'am.
Okay, can we have a motion?
I so
for-
moved.
Richard?
You're joining.
Thank you. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you all,
Appreciate that
and we
time.
appreciate, the ethics committee, we appreciate y'all being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Thank you so much.
Looks like we might see each other more often now.
Yeah.